Hello and welcome into this first ARCA Menards Series rewind show of 2020 right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, consider going down below to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. It feels so good to do that intro again. It feels good to be back doing a rewind show. It has been a long offseason. I know really it hasn't been that long. It's only been like 5 months since the last ARCA race in October, and then we did Cup rewinds and all that through Homestead. So I mean, it's only been about 2 months, but still, it felt like a long time. The off season always does, and I mean, it's in the dead of winter, so it's a kind of a boring time anyway. So I'm just glad to be back doing this. I hope you're glad that we are back as well. I'm just glad that racing is back and that we're back with some ARCA racing. So excited for this. Of course, we were down in Florida this weekend, both for Daytona and for New Smyrna, so it was a little weird getting these done down there. I tried, and then it wasn't working out. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but it worked out better to just do them both as one rewind show here when we got home. So we're recapping both the Lucas Oil 200 from Saturday night for the ARCA Menards Series, as well as the Skips Western Outfitters 175 from Monday night for the ARCA Menards Series East. Both of those in this one rewind show. It's not going to be how we're going to normally do it going forward. It is going to be generally one race per rewind show going forward, but just with how this had to work out in terms of logistics down in Florida, this is how we're going to have to do this one. So bear with me here. We got 2 races to cover here, so let's dive right into it. We'll start off with the first one that happened. That was Saturday night, the Lucas Oil 200, driven by General Tire from Daytona International Speedway. 80 laps, 200 miles, around the 2.5-mile Daytona International Speedway in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers here, but this was not a fantastic race. There wasn't a lot happening in this race. Sure, we had a couple caution or a couple wrecks. We had a big one, but in terms of like good on-track racing product, we didn't have a lot. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that because this is an ARCA race, we have a lot of very inexperienced drivers in this field that are just trying to learn how to race at Daytona. A lot of these drivers, it was their first time at Daytona. Very few drivers in this race in a competitive car that have experience at Daytona. Really, probably Michael Self was about one of the only drivers in this race in a competitive car that had experience at Daytona. You could probably throw Riley Herbst onto that list. I'm sure there's a couple others here as I scroll down the list here. Gus Dean is probably one. Natalie Decker was in a pretty good car and had experience here at Daytona. So the list was very short of drivers that actually had experience here. So generally what these teams have been telling these younger, inexperienced drivers to do is just to stay in line, don't make any big moves. And that makes sense to an extent. Obviously, you don't want these drivers going out and being crazy and causing big ones and just having it be a wreck fest, kind of making it look like the Busch Clash was. Kind of crazy how the ARCA race was cleaner than the Busch Clash. But that's neither here nor there. But it made for some fairly boring racing. There wasn't a lot happening. Nobody jumped out of line there at the end of the race. Hailie Deegan never made a move on Michael Self at the end of this race to try and take the win away from him. She just sat there single file at the end of the race, was content with second. And I understand why. She said in the media center later after the race that she knew she had Drew Dollar behind her, which is Michael Self's teammate this season. So she knew that if she made a move, Drew was probably not going with her, that he would stick with Michael, and that she would, in essence, it wouldn't do any good for her. So I understand the thinking there, but at the same time, it is Daytona. Do you not want to win at Daytona? We had, like 4 or 5 cars in the lead pack at the end of this race, so even if you jump out of line on the last lap with a run and nobody goes with you, the worst you're going to fall back to is what? 4th? 5th? 6th? I get that she's running for the championship this year, so the points do matter even if you don't win the race, but how many points are you really losing by dropping from second to fourth or fifth? If it were me, I think I would rather go for the win at Daytona. I'd rather go down swinging and miss it and lose a couple of spots than I would just sit there content with second and not even try to win at the biggest race on the schedule. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. We didn't have a lot of cars left at the end of this race to begin with, so there wasn't a lot of momentum to be had to make runs on the leader. So I get that you probably thought that there wasn't really a way to make that run, but at the same time, if it were me, I would have at least tried. Because what are you going to lose? 2-3 spots? The championship may come down to that at the end of the season. Again, look at what we had last year between Christian Eckes and Michael Self. It can come down to that close of a championship, but at the same time, the odds are it probably won't. So those couple of spots you lose probably won't make a difference either way at the end of the season, whether you win or lose the championship. They could. I'm not saying they won't, but the odds are they probably won't. So if it were me, I would take the chance to take the win at Daytona rather than just sit there content with that second position. But I do find it interesting that our only 3 full-time drivers this season, Michael Self, Hailie Deegan, and Drew Dollar, all finished 1, 2, 3 in this race. I know it's Daytona, so that may not be indicative of how this championship is going to play out throughout the rest of the season, but it is interesting that our 3 full-time drivers did finish in the top 3 positions in this race. The only cautions in this race, we had one at lap 2 for Andy Seiss, kind of doing a Lightning McQueen impression, down through the grass from the backstretch, kind of got turned into the grass and then back up hard into the wall in turn 3. If you remember the Bubba Wallace wreck from Pocono a couple years ago where he lost his brakes and just kind of drove straight through the grass and up into the wall. It's kind of what this reminded me of. It wasn't a loss of brakes. It was just he kind of got turned down there and didn't have anywhere to go. So it was just kind of like a high-speed, bumpy ride through the grass. Lap 13, the 97 of Jason Kitzmiller blew his engine. Lap 19, Brad Smith spun in turn 1. The big one happened at lap 40 between Andy Seiss, Natalie Decker, John Ferrier, Dave Mater, and Jacob Hefner. That happened in turn 1. Lap 51, the 11 of Chuck Hires spun on the backstretch, and final caution was at lap 72 for debris in turn number 2. Michael Self led the most laps in this race, 61 laps. 7 laps went to Sean Corr, 8 laps were led by Brett Holmes, 4 laps went to Tanner Gray. All right, on to your results. Michael Self, of course, did win this race, his second Daytona win in 3 years. A great drive out of Michael Self. Led all but 19 laps in this race. Very, very dominant in this race. Made it look pretty easy. And he said after the race, I asked him post-race, was it as easy as it looked? And he admitted that nothing is ever easy at Daytona, which is fair enough. But he did make it look fairly easy in this one. Once he was out in the lead, there really wasn't anybody touching him in this race. Hailie Deegan came home a close second to start off her quest toward the 2020 ARCA Menards Series Championship, with the other full-time Venturini Motorsports driver Drew Dollar back there in third. A great run for Sean Corr in the 4th position. Always good to see him run well at Daytona. And then Thad Moffitt in a DGR Crosley car came home in the 5th position. Rest of your top 10. Good run for Jason White in a fast track number 12 car. He brought that car home in the 6th position. Riley Herbst came home in 7th. Good run for Willie Mullins back there in the 8th position. Good to see Big Willie getting a good run there at Daytona. Brett Holmes came home in 9th. And a strong top 10 run for Scott Melton there in the 10th position. Good to see that Kimmel Racing number 69 have a good run at Daytona. 11th through 20th, good runs down here for a lot of drivers, including Thomas Prater, who we did not see all of last season, did make his return this race in Daytona, brought it home in the 11th position. David Gravel making his stock car debut in the 28 car for KBR Development. Not quite the finish he was looking for, ended up 1 lap down there in the 12th position. Tanner Gray had a very fast car in this race. Unfortunately, with about 10 laps to go, had an oil leak. The car was smoking there for a good solid 2 or 3 laps before he finally had to bring it down pit road. Apparently, they had punctured the radiator at one point. This is my understanding of what had happened here. They punctured the radiator at one point, and that damage eventually somehow made its way to the oil pan and leaked all the oil out. So he was eventually running that engine with no oil in it. So if anybody understands, I'm sure there's folks out there that understand how engines work. You don't want to run an engine without oil in it. Eventually, what happened to Tanner Gray will happen to that engine. So unfortunately, he was 10 laps shy of the end of this race. If he'd been up there at the end of this race, maybe we would have seen a run out of him and Hailie Deegan going for that win, since she would have had a teammate up there to go with her and not just Drew Dollar behind her, who assumably would have just gone with Michael Self. So maybe we would have seen a little better racing at the end of this race had Tanner Gray made it to the end of the race. Connor Hall, his second year in a row in that Chad Bryant Racing number 22 car, had overheating issues there just past the midpoint of the race and had to settle for the 20th position. Ryan Repko, making one of his few starts this season in that 20 car for Venturini Motorsports, had a decent run going. Unfortunately, got caught up in a crash at lap 40 and came home in the 22nd position. Same thing for Gus Dean, caught up in the same wreck. He came home in the 23rd position, making his return to that Wintron number 32 car. Dominique Van Wieringen, fastest in preseason testing, or in one of the sessions in preseason testing from Daytona. Unfortunately, she got caught up in a crash in that Rhett Jones Racing 30 car there about the halfway point and wasn't able to complete the race. She came home in the 25th position. Natalie Decker in the Ken Schrader Racing 52 car, prepared by Fury Race Cars, had a good run going. I think she had some speed in that car, might have made a little bit of a run at the end of the race had she not got caught up in that big one. 26th for her. Jacob Hefner in the 77 for Chad Bryant Racing, making his ARCA debut. He came home in 27th after being caught up in that big one. Then final page down here, 31st through 33rd. Brad Smith, after his spin, came home in 31st. Jason Kitzmiller, after his engine issues, 32nd. Scott Reeves, shotgun on the field in 33rd, did not complete a lap after drivetrain issues. So let's take a look at your points following Daytona here very quickly. Obviously going to look very similar to the finishing results. The biggest drivers you'll want to look at here are your top three: Michael Self, Hailie Deegan, and Drew Dollar, as those are your full-time drivers this season, and those are the ones we're going to have to watch going forward for the main ARCA Menards Series Championship. Of course, once we start the Sioux Chief Showdown at Phoenix in a couple of weeks, we'll have that championship to look at as well, and there assumably will be more drivers competing for that championship than just the three going for the main championship here. But as of now, for the main ARCA Menards Series Championship, these are the three that we really have to look at. Michael Self, of course, with that win and leading the most laps, currently leads by 7 points over Hailie Deegan, with Drew Dollar 1 point behind her, 8 points off of his teammate Michael Self. If you have not heard, the point structure is just a tad different this year than it has been in past years with ARCA. As you see here, Michael Self only has 49 points for that win. It's not the like classic 5-point increments that it used to be, where what was it? You'd get like around 200 points for winning. I don't remember the exact number, but it was obviously a lot more than 49. They've gone to more of the current point structure for NASCAR, where it's 1 point differences, with the winner getting 43 points plus 3 points for winning, and then extra points for 1 point for the pole, 1 point for leading a lap, and 1 point for most laps led. Of course, Michael Self starting on the pole, he got points for all of that after leading the most laps as well. That's why he got max points at 49 points in this race. So definitely a good start to the season, not just for picking up another Daytona win, but for getting max points and getting the biggest point lead possible, leaving this race one race into the season. All right, so let's now move on to the other ARCA race for the weekend. Actually, technically not part of the weekend Monday night. It was the Skips Western Outfitters 175 from the New Smyrna Speedway. This was a race dominated by one car for the most part. We had good racing back in the pack, but for the most part, the racing for the lead until the very end of the race was fairly non-existent. Derek Griffith making his first career ARCA Menards Series East start in the Chad Bryant Racing number 2 car, ran away with this race. Led a total of 144 of the 175 laps in this race. Started from the pole and took off. Nobody was able to touch him. 2 pit stops later, he had not pitted, still on old tires, everybody else on fresh tires, and he was still holding them off 140 laps into the race on his same tires he had started the race with versus guys that had just pitted 20, 30 laps ago. It was absolutely incredible what Derek Griffith was able to do with that 2 car in this race. I'm sure it's a combination of a very talented driver in Derek Griffith that is basically an unknown commodity at this point. Unless you've seen him on the local short track scene, you don't really know what the kid has for talent. But I think he showed us on Monday night that he is very talented. He is here to stay. And personally, I hope this opens some doors for him. Hopefully, if Chad Bryant Racing doesn't put him in the car more going forward, which I imagine they will after that fantastic run. If they don't for some reason, I hope somebody else picks him up, because this kid showed Monday night that he is super talented and deserves more seat time, either in the ARCA East Series, in the Showdown, in the West Series, wherever you can put him in a car, because he showed us Monday night he is fantastic. Unfortunately, though, did not come home with the win. And I think the even more impressive part here came after he finally made that pit stop 140 laps into the race, or technically 144, since that's how many laps he led. He led the first 144 laps, or most of the first 144 laps. Sam Mayer led 1 lap off of a restart. So at lap 145, when he finally came down pit road for fresh tires, had to start all the way from the back, drove his way through the field in the final 30 laps and was on Sam Mayer's bumper at the checkered flag. Didn't quite have time to get to him, but if we'd had 2 more laps, Derek Griffith would have won this race, driving from the back with 30 laps to go. That, I think, was the even more impressive part than holding everybody off on 145 lap old tires. This kid put on a clinic at New Smyrna Speedway, and I think opened a lot of eyes as to how truly talented that he is. Even if he didn't get the win, that was the incredible part. He was the show on Monday night and didn't even get the win. That's how impressive of a drive Derek Griffith made on Monday night. Sam Mayer, though, did come home with the win. A big statement out of Sam Mayer, because after winning the championship last season, he comes back this season, still not old enough really to run anything beyond the East and the West and the Showdown races. So he comes back for another full season in the East to try and go 2 in a row in the East Series, and makes a statement the first race out, wins the race, says, I'm here to go back-to-back and win another championship. And he made a very impressive statement Monday night. May not have had the fastest car, but did go to victory lane, and that's the important part. Did have a very fast car, though, but I don't think anybody was touching Derek Griffith if Derek Griffith had anything to say about it. Only 4 caution flags in this race. First one at lap 65 is the 43 of Daniel Dye, stopped in turn 4 after getting a flat tire. Lap 88, very similar situation to the first caution, as the 20 of Corey Himes stopped in turn 4 after he had a flat tire as well. Lap 143, Daniel Dye, again the cause of the caution as he wrecks in turn 3. And lap 154, final caution of the night. Big, scary incident as the 17 of Tanner Gray 25 of Mason Diaz, and the 1 of Max McLaughlin all run out of room off of turn 4. Max McLaughlin had made it 3 wide through 3 and 4, which obviously was not going to work. They all just kind of ran out of room off of turn 4 as McLaughlin slides up to take the room that he needs, ends up shoving Diaz into Gray, who gets shoved into the outside wall and tips on his side and rides the wall all the way from the exit of turn 4 to the start-finish line. Scary incident. Tanner Gray was okay, though. Not something you expect to see on a short track like that. We did have a bit of a red flag after that, though, as he did, I believe, snapped a couple cables on the fence. So we had to get that repaired. Everybody was okay in the stands, though, as far as I'm aware. I didn't hear of anybody getting injured from that, and it didn't seem like they took anybody away for any injuries. So seemed like everybody was okay from that. But very weird incident. Like I said, not something you expect to see on a short track, but definitely made for one of the more exciting moments of the night, in a night that was dominated by Derek Griffith. Again, Derek Griffith did lead the most laps at 144. Sam Mayer led a total of 27, and Ty Gibbs spent 4 circuits out front in this race. All right, so let's take a look at your results from this race. Of course, we mentioned Sam Mayer winning the race. First win of the season as he starts his quest for a second championship in a row. Derek Griffith, oh so close to an almost perfect night. Just came up short there in the second position. Like I said, a couple more laps, and I think he would have had this one and would have capped off a very impressive night. Ty Gibbs, a strong run there in third. He was very disappointed after this one. He thought he had a car capable of winning. I'm not sure anybody had anything for Derek Griffith, so I understand Ty's frustration, but I don't know that he really had anything for Derek Griffith when all was said and done. I don't know that anybody had anything for Derek Griffith, especially on the fresh tires that Griffith had at the end of this race. Speaking of Ty's emotions after the race, I forgot to mention this earlier, but all the post-race interviews we did this weekend are linked down below in the description. A winner interview with Michael Self from Saturday night from Daytona, as well as the top 3 finishers from this race, Sam Mayer, Derek Griffith, and Ty Gibbs. They're all linked down below in the description if you want to check those out if you haven't already. See what these drivers thought after the end of the race. Nick Sanchez came home in the 4th position. Strong run for him, starting his full season quest there with Rev Racing. And Giovanni Bromonte with a strong run there in the top 5 in that Visconti 74 car. Good run for him on the night. Stephen Nasse, a late entry there in the 09 for Jet Motorsports. The short track ace, the guy that almost won the Snowball Derby this past season before it was taken away from him in post-race inspection. Very well known on the short track circuits. He had a very strong run on the night as well, came home in the 6th position. Corey Heim, I think, might have had the only car capable of running with Derek Griffith on Monday night. Very strong at different points, and I think had he been given the opportunity at the end of the race, would have been able to challenge Derek Griffith and definitely Sam Mayer. Unfortunately, with the tire issue that he had, never was quite able to recover from that and landed in the 7th position. Parker Retzlaff there in the 8th position. Chase Cabry came home in 9th, and Max McLaughlin rounded out the top 10. 11th through 20th, Tristan Van Wieringen, the younger brother of Dominique Van Wieringen that we saw in the Daytona race. He'll be running the full ARCA East schedule here in that 30 car for Rhett Jones Racing. He brought it home in a respectable 11th place finish. Jesse Love, the highest finishing Bill McAnally Racing Toyota in this race. A very off night for Bill McAnally Racing. I don't think it's... I've seen some talk that it might be that these drivers aren't what they're touted to be. The 4 new drivers that BMR picked up this season, and in fact there is a 5th driver, Lawless Allen, that didn't make the trip to New Smyrna, but I think BMR has some very talented drivers this season. I think it was just, for whatever reason, they just didn't have the speed this weekend. I don't know what it was. I can't explain it. hopefully they know what the issue is and they're able to get it resolved, but I don't think this will be an indication on how these drivers will do this season, because I think there is some definite talent in that BMR stable this season. I think we're going to see some really good runs going forward from them in the ARCA Menards Series West, as well as whatever ARCA East races they show up for as well. And I don't know if they're going to show up for any Sioux Chief Showdown races or not yet. I guess we'll see what happens with that. It would be nice to see BMR show up at some of these Showdown races, if not all of them, but I guess we'll have to see what happens there. Gio Scelzi, another BMR car, came home there in the 13th position, taking over that 16 ride this season from Derek Kraus, moving up to the Truck Series. Holly Holland, another BMR car there in 15th in the 50 JBL Toyota. And Gracie Trotter, the 4th BMR car, landed in the 16th position, that number 99 Ineos Toyota. Mason Diaz, after his scary incident with Tanner Gray, lands in the 17th position with Tanner Gray right there behind him in 18th. Daniel Dye, after all of his incidents on the night, landed in 19th. And Big Willie Mullins doing the double with Daytona this weekend. He landed in the 20th position. Final page, 21st through 23rd, all these drivers having some sort of mechanical issue at different points of the night. The 91 of Justin Carroll in 21st, the 11 of Chuck Hires in 22nd, and the 11E of Farmer Bob Pulowski there in the 23rd position. All right, so let's move on now to the point standings for the ARCA Menards Series East following this race. Again, just like the Daytona race, going to look very similar to the results, of course, because this is the first race of the season. But the drivers to look at here, of course, are going to be the ones running the full season. Sam Mayer, of course, starting off his quest for a second championship in a row in very good position here with the points lead. Ty Gibbs running the full ARCA East schedule this season. He currently sits 6 points back from Sam Mayer. Currently in the 3rd position, Nick Sanchez, 8 points off of Sam Mayer. I believe Giovanni Bramante is running the full season as well. They're 9 points back in 5th. Then we have to jump down to, I believe Parker Retzlaff is also running a full season. He's currently 8th, 12 points back. Chase Cabry in 9th, 13 back. Max McLaughlin there in 10th, 14 points off of the lead. The points obviously will clean themselves up a bit as we move 2 to 3 races down the road, and the full-time drivers move to the top and the part-time drivers start to fall back a bit in the points, and we'll get to see a clearer picture of who's running for the championship and who is not. But I believe as of right now, what is that? 5, 6, 7 of the top 10, I believe, are running for the championship this year. I think the only ones there that aren't would be, at least as of now, would be Derek Griffith, Stephen Nasse, and Corey Heim. Obviously, that can change with the impressive run that Derek Griffith put on. It is very possible he could pick up a full season ride going forward. We'll see what happens there. I would really like to see that because I think he could really contend for this ARCA East Championship if Monday night was any indication. But I think that's going to do it for this first ARCA Rewind show of the season. Next Rewind show, I'm going to shoot to do one for the trucks on Friday night. We're gonna shift a little bit this year. ARCA races, I think, are going to be the only races that are guaranteed rewind shows this season. That's going to be the main focus this season is ARCA, because that seems to be the bread and butter here. Obviously, we do most of our on-track stuff from ARCA races, and that's what everybody seems to gravitate toward the most is the ARCA coverage, since there's not a lot of that out there. So we're going to do our best to give you the most ARCA coverage possible this season. Now, that doesn't mean we're completely abandoning the top 3 series or anything like that. We're still going to do coverage of them. I'm going to try to do as many rewind shows as I can for Trucks, Xfinity, Cup, all of that. But I can't guarantee that there's going to be a rewind show for every one of those races. I'm going to shoot to have one for each of the Daytona races this weekend. I can't promise anything, but I'm going to really do my best to try and make that happen, especially the Trucks and the Cup race. Daytona 500, obviously. Daytona 500, I'm going to guarantee you right now there will be a rewind show. I don't know about the trucks and Xfinity. I'm going to really try for trucks, and should be an Xfinity one as well. Outside of that, the only guarantees are going to be ARCA races. So look out for those. We do have an ARCA race coming up next week, a week from tomorrow. The ARCA West kicks off their season from the Vegas Bull Ring, so keep an eye out for coverage of that. We will not be at the track for that one, but we'll have coverage of it and hopefully a winner interview to go along with the rewind show. So keep an eye out for that. All of this fun stuff going forward, and hopefully a few more things starting up here in the near future. We got plans for things, just needing to lock things down and get things in place and all that fun stuff. So keep an eye out for more new stuff going forward, not just rewind shows each week and diecast reviews. Speaking of diecast reviews, got a cool truck coming up for you tomorrow on diecast review. It's going to be Greg Biffle's Texas win from this past season. Really cool diecast. Looking forward to doing that one, so keep an eye out for that coming up tomorrow. But that's going to do it for this rewind show. So if you haven't done it already, you need to go down below, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. While you're down there, I want you to hit that big thumbs up button if you like the video. It is much appreciated when you do. But at that, this has been the ARCA Menards Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.